Namaste. So this morning I'm called to share from the meditation cushion one of the most profound and powerful practices that has been of great value to me in my own journey of awakening. And this is something that I started doing, I think, about 1.5 years ago or so, here in Sedona, after I'd moved to Sedona. So here's the practice, and I highly recommend it. But most people won't do it. Most people might try it for a moment and have limited success initially and abandon it and go back to easier things. But here's the practice. It's a simple practice, not necessarily easy, but it's simple, but it's not meant to be easy. And I'll explain that in a moment. The practice is to come out of a meditation, whatever meditation you're doing. And you don't even have to do it coming out of a meditation, but it is a little bit helpful because you're already coming from a place of stillness, a place of relative quiet. And the practice is, before you open your eyes, remind yourself that when you open your eyes, you're going to gaze out upon the world around you and not name anything. Not name anything, which is an interpretation, not to interpret anything, not to assess the value or the threat or the how cool is that, or that's beautiful, or I like that, or nothing. So it's no storytelling. You don't tell any story. You don't define. You don't describe anything in your mind about what you're witnessing, what you're noticing around you. So if I come out of a meditation, I open my eyes, I might look out. I'm often looking out here in Sedona on the red rocks in the sky and the trees and such. And the practice is, and again, it's the most powerful one of the most powerful practices I know. The practice is to not name anything. Not, oh wow, sky, rocks, trees, or even beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, I like that. But just to be with that which you're witnessing and not have any relative story about it, relative to the ego self, relative to the conditioned, constructed self. So it's not tree, it's not rocks, it's not sky, it's not couch, it's not houseplant. It's not, what do I think about that? And, oh, that's nice. And is this, do I need to clean the floor? Do I need to water the plant? It's none of that. Now, when I first started to do this, the very first time I did this, I would say I could hold that space of not naming anything for about 3 seconds. That was it. And then so the reason I mention that is because the idea is not to necessarily be successful at this practice, because it'll just be most likely frustrating if you're trying to be successful. The gift in this practice initially is to notice how quickly and how habitually the mind needs to and wants to name its experience. It wants to name it as, I like that, I don't like that, that's nice, ooh, that's beautiful, oh, that's lovely. And it can seem so innocuous, like how harmful is that to be able to look out at something and say, oh, that is so precious, I appreciate how beautiful that is. In this practice, It's actually taking the I out of the equation. I appreciate that, but I don't appreciate that. I love that, but I don't really love that. The practice helps to start to get a little bit of distance and notice that there's a storyteller. There's something that the majority of the noise in our mind is a constant assessment and interpretation of the world around us. And it's the ego that's doing that. It is the constructed self, the self that we have created in our own mind that feels like it needs to interpret and assess everything for its survival, for its to find the ego's place in the world. So this is the practice. Try to not name anything, and then if you want, you can. As soon as you recognize that it's hard to do, and you're starting to name things as beautiful or blue sky or green trees or I like that, close your eyes again. Take some breaths, go within, find the stability, the peace, the presence, the isness. Then open the eyes again and again. Look out upon the world and just play with not naming anything. Ultimately, what this does is it allows us to recognize the difference between the ego mind, the ego self that is constantly assessing and interpreting and naming and defining the world around us. And when that is absent, when that is dissolved, when that's no longer running the show, what we find is that the pure infinite awareness that we are, the pure infinite loving awareness that we are, has no need to tell stories. It just is. And it is with what is. And it starts to become then just the way of being where you notice it in all of your relationships. What used to trigger the self, the constructed self, when that self isn't there, just lands on pure awareness. You can just be with. Somebody can be projecting their bullshit on you, and you can just be with it and not be telling a story. The storyteller's gone. And it's a beautiful state. And so the reason I brought it up today is because I was coming out of my meditation recognizing that what used to be hard for me to hold for longer than about 3 seconds now is predominant within like an hour-long meditation. That's just the predominant experience, even with my eyes open and gazing about the world around me. It's just a witnessing and it's a noticing without any naming. And it's a peace, it's a beautiful freedom. It opens up this expansive beingness rather than the narrow person, the narrow constructed person with all the person's judgments and assessments and interpretations. When that's not there, you're just with. It's just love, being with love. So try it, play with it. You can also do it in your not coming out of a meditation, just sometime when you're at a stoplight or something driving, and just remember and stop and close your eyes for a second and then open your eyes again and look around and just see how long you can just be with the world around you without interpreting and naming and telling stories about every person you see and everything that's happening around you. And you will start to recognize that the majority of the noise in your mind is the constructed, conditioned self, the storyteller telling stories about the world. And the reason it does that is it needs to keep the story alive. It needs to keep the story of self, the story of the conditioned, constructed, made-up self. It needs to keep that alive, and it does it by telling a relative story, relative to everything around it, rather than being in our absolute truth as pure, loving, infinite awareness. It doesn't need to tell a story. It doesn't need to defend, project, find a position in the world. It just is with whatever is. Namaste. Again, I'll just remind you, it's one of the most powerful practices that I have ever, that was valuable in my own awakening and distancing of, oh my God, this thing that tells the stories all the time, that's crazy. And that's not me, that's a made up me. What's beyond that? Pointing the awareness, pointing the inquiry as to, if I'm not that storyteller, then what is the infinite nature of my being that doesn't need to tell stories and is beautiful to sit and just be and witness the world. It's just love meeting love, love meeting love. It's a very open, expansive way of loving and being in the world, rather than the narrow storyteller telling narrow stories about everything. So much love. Blessings. Namaste.